Okay, so let's do this. I'm gonna go talk about the Rings of Power. This is going to be a 4-part series that I'm kind of making. As far as in my mind right now, this is what we got. Part 1, which is this one right here, is going to be a general overview of the first 4 episodes. Part 2 is going to be an in-depth view just on the arc of the Southlands and how it doesn't really make sense just based on the world building of themselves. We're kind of not really pay attention to the whole Tolkien lore at the moment. We're just going to focus on that. That's episode 2. Episode 3 will come back and do a recap of the general overview of the later 4 episodes, so 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then part 4 will be the finishing of the Southland arc and how, more depth on that one there. So that's generally in my mind what we have right now. So stay tuned for a 4-part series. Part 1, here we go. As you can see, I got a whiteboard. And I apologize if I'm not fully in the screen right here because I'm not really important right now, so we're just going to focus on the whiteboard here. So, if I'm out of screen, just ignore that because this is what we're focusing on right here. I'm going to see, is there a little bit of a glare over there? I'm going to see if I can move the light a little bit so I can move that away. Is that a little bit better for you guys? Hopefully? Alright, so, again, I'm kind of making this up as we go along here. So there we go. Got a bunch of lights right here trying to illuminate it up so you can see this right here. So, what do we got? Well, we have our cast of characters up here. So, we have the Númenórean story arc, we have the Elves of Eregion story arc, we have the Southlanders arc, and we have the Harfoots story arc right here. So, who are all these people? Where are they at in the story? So, we're gonna start from here, Númenor. The Númenors, first over here, we have Galadriel over here, which I know is weird because she kind of starts off with the elves, but from episode 2 onwards, it's basically in the Númenórean story arc, so that's why I have lumped her over here. So Galadriel, she's got the pointy ears. I don't know if you can see that, but so that's the elf right there. So that's Galadriel. We also have Halbrand, who is very plain. He's just a stick figure. There's nothing. He's not holding anything. Not to symbolize him. That's because he's kind of a nobody. He just shows up, and there's nothing really special about him. Hint, hint. Then we have our kind of the ruling of Númenor. We have the queen, who's actually sort of the ruling, not King Pharazôn. It's actually Queen Miriel. She's actually regent because her father is actually the true king, but he's in the tower and he can't really rule right now for reasons. So it passes down to his lineage, which is his only daughter. But because she is married to Pharazôn, because that's why he has the scepter there. So technically he can rule even though he's not really king. So, Pharazôn kind of viewed as the king, not really. But Miriel, she's Queen Regent of Númenor. And then we have Elendil the Tall. That's why he's so much bigger than everyone, because in the lore, Elendil is close to 8 feet tall. Because the Númenor is on average around 7 feet tall. But that's why he has the sword, because he's the warrior right there. So we have Queen Miriel and her husband, Pharazôn, who's kind of ruling Númenor. We have Elendil the Tall. For those of you who don't know, that's the son who kind of was defeated by Sauron, and his son Isildur came and cut off the ring. Hence this is the show is called The Rings of Power. I guess they want to do a play like, hey, we're gonna bring in Elendil in here, like one who went up against Sauron in the battle, right there. So we have Elendil, and the reasons Galadriel and Halbrand, Galadriel the elf, Halbrand the nobody, gets shipwrecked on his Elendil ship, and he takes them to Númenor to meet Queen Miriel and Lord Pharazôn. Now, where is Númenor? Let's get rid of this for a moment. Let's put on a map here. Okay, so here's the map of Middle-earth. You probably don't see Númenor on here. That's because Númenor, by the time of this map, does not exist. Spoiler, Númenor is destroyed. It falls. It sinks into the sea because it's an island. Basically, it's right down over there. If there's the kind of, it's like the map of Middle Earth area, it's like, hey, welcome to Middle Earth. This is the land right there. That little sign right there that says welcome there. Yeah, that's basically around where Númenor would be right there. So it's a big island, probably about that size too. So let's run around over there. So that's the Númenorian arc, where it's at, and who's in there. Galadriel, Halbrand, Queen Regent Miriel, Pharazôn, and Elendil the Tall. Númenor. Moving on to the Elven story arc. Yes, getting that map out of here. We have High King Gil-galad. He is the king of the elves in Eregion. So let's put up a map here quickly right here. So we have this whole sorry, not Eregion, Eriador. This, see that giant region there? Eriador right there? Okay. That is where the elves sort of rule right there. King Gil-galad, let's keep the map up here for a second. Gil-galad is ruling in Lindon. You might not see it on this map here, but you might see on the far western coast right there, you might see like Forlinden and Harlinden way over there. You might see like the city of the Grey Havens. That's around the area of where Lindon is. Okay, so that's the capital. So that's naturally where the king, Gil-galad, with his spear, would be ruling over there. The next region that we have is what's called Eregion. And if you keep looking further this way, up to the border of the Misty Mountains, you see the region right there that says Eregion, right there? Okay, that is where another one of our characters, Celebrimbor, takes place. Let's get rid of the map here. So, we have Celebrimbor. You see, most of these have pointy ears, so we go right here, so that Celebrimbor the elf, he has the hammer right there because he is a smith. So he is one of the master elven smiths in Eregion, that region right next to the Misty Mountains there. And Elrond, see right here, he's not holding anything because there's nothing really differentiated from him, because his kind of power is his words. He's kind of like a diplomat, but I can't really draw a mouth on there, so that would look really weird. So, you know, that's what makes him, but, you know, he still has the pointy ears, so he's the elf. He's the elf sent by King Gil-galad to Celebrimbor to help him figure out this whole smithing debacle that kind of takes part in the series. So he goes from Lindon, all the way over in the east, to Eregion, to the Misty Mountains. Which is another because the Misty Mountains is the border kind of like of that region and the Misty Mountain area, because the mountains is kind of like the home of the dwarves, which is where we get to these shorter people here. You see they don't have pointy ears. Yes, because these are the dwarves. We have Prince Durin, or we'll say Durin the Younger, and he's the hammer, because, you know, he's the more younger dwarf. He's the more agile, he's in the mines, he's kind of like a miner and smith right there, so he's kind of dealing with that. And we also have his father, King Durin, Durin the Elder, being a lot more older, has a fabulous beard, by the way. Well, he wears the crown, so King Durin rules the lands of the dwarves, and his son, Prince Durin, you know, kind of like heir to the throne, and he's friends with Elrond, which is kind of why King Gil-galad sent Elrond to Celebrimbor, the Master Smith, to try to get help from the dwarves of Prince Durin the Younger and King Durin the Elder. So, I think that covers who and where of the elves. Moving on to the Southlands. This might be a bit confusing for some of you. For those of you who have not seen the show, which is kind of like a little bit for this whole video is kind of a little bit kind of for my sister, like who doesn't have Amazon Prime, and so she's not able to there, but to her and to all of you who want to know what the heck this is all about and why this show kind of really fails, this is kind of for you, with a little bit of Easter eggs for those of you who have seen the show and you're like, oh, I know that reference. So, Southlands. Because, you know, the subtlety is not really their strong suit here. The Southlands, this is the version of what they're calling Mordor. It's like, if you could put the map up here one second, we have this, you know, we who have any idea of the lore of Lord of the Rings, we have this dark, ominous region of Mordor. Well, apparently in this timeline, it's not Mordor quite yet, right now. Okay, so it's called the Southlands. It's down the south, and they are kind of taking place in what's called the Sea of Nirnen. We'll have Nirn down there. It's also the southern part of Mordor. Even there, it's the Southlands right there. We're not way down below what's called Harad. We're not there yet. So we're just kind of in Mordor right now, but it's not Mordor because for reasons. So we just have the region of the Southlands right there towards the lower end of those mountain regions right over there. So that's where the Southlands are kind of criminalized. Now, move that out of the way. So we have our cast of characters. We only have 4 people here, so hey, well, that's good. We have Arondir. We'll start with him. Arondir, I don't know if you can see, he's got the pointy ears, so he is an elf. He is an elf that is stationed down there because in the Southlands there, because the Southlanders, way back when, decided to side with Morgoth, the original Dark Lord, and when, you know, Morgoth was eventually defeated and his minions scattered, one of them being his chief lieutenant, Sauron, he decides to take up the mantle and says, I'm going to pick up where he left off. So we're kind of, the whole idea of the whole Sauron kind of picking up where he started and where was going on here. So like these guys, original ancestors of the Southlanders, sided with Morgoth So King Gil-galad of the elves, way up in Lindon, decided to station some elves in an outpost in the Southlands to sort of keep an eye over them to see if there's any chance of, like, if they know what's going on, if they might side with this new uprising of Sauron or whatever. So just, you know, keep an eye on them. So he's stationed over there. The Southlanders in general do not have like a very fond appreciation for the sort of elven occupation that is kind of watching over them. They are under the belief that, like, hey, that was like who knows how many centuries ago. Okay, like why are we kind of sort of being punished for things that we didn't do? That whole kind of thing right there. But regardless, Arondir, our elf watchman ranger type character, he's keeping watch over the Southlands, and in his time of watching over there, he has kind of spotted this human female named Bronwyn. And let's just say that he has developed sort of feelings for Bronwyn over here, and it seems that, like, Bronwyn herself has reciprocated the feelings back towards him, that she kind of likes him. Bronwyn, that's a flower she's holding. Bronwyn is sort of like the old school herbalist type kind of healer of, like, sort of like the town. She's also, because, you know, she deals with like rare like plants and herbs, so she's kind of like a bit of a florist as well, because she has these seeds that she uses, so that's why she's probably holding the flower right there. She also has a son named Theo, which is this guy right here. So Bronwyn has a son named Theo, and so this whole kind of like nurturing aspect that she kind of has together there, where she like wanting to be like the healer, she likes growing things, she has a son, that motherly aspect. So that's kind of like Bronwyn's type of character. And so Theo is not Arondir's son, by the way. So Theo, I don't know if we mentioned like who his dad was, but apparently the real dad is not in the picture anywhere. It's like not mentioned anywhere, so it's not really a big deal. Maybe season 2 there'll be like a big reveal, like who was his dad? I have no idea. But so Theo is Bronwyn's son. Don't know who the real dad is. Bronwyn sort of likes Arondir. Arondir sort of likes Bronwyn. And then we have finally Waldrick, because he has the Butcher Cleaver. He is sort of like the tavern kind of owner, proprietor right there. He has not... I want to say he doesn't have like too much say in everything, but he has like, I know, because he kind of like owns the town and people gather to his place, and he kind of like controls, you know, like what goes on in the towers, you know, like, hey, hold on to the rules, you know, this is what happens in my place. So, you know, like he has a little bit of say in like the whole town, so people kind of look up to him. He doesn't really have like too much against the elves particularly, but, you know, like since he has kind of like more say than people look at him as like a figurehead where they're like, hey, they want to voice their opinions. They kind of look up to him a little bit. At least that's how far I interpret it, at least right there. So we had the Waldrick, the tavern owner, who specifically doesn't have anything too much against Arondir, you know, per se. But, you know, like, but he is a bit suspicious that Arondir and Bronwyn like each other, and so he's kind of the idea about the whole elf and human sort of dynamic right there. And of course now, however, he kind of does have like a little bit of wanting to look after Theo a little bit, but we'll see where that goes right there. So we have Arondir stationed in the Southlands. He kind of likes Bronwyn, the herbalist. Bronwyn has a son named Theo, and they all kind of live in the city of the Southlands, where Waldrick, the tavern owner, kind of has some say among people what's going on over there. So that is the Southlands. Moving on to the Harfoots. Okay, where are these people at? Let's put a map up here. Here we go. These are in what's called Rhovanion, and specifically what's around the region called the Brownlands, right there. So, but they have a sort of migratory path that they take, where they kind of work their way down around sort of what we would call like Athelion, it looks like, and then around the top of the mountains and like sort of to Mirkwood area, and they kind of just do this whole little path, and then where they go to each different place, and they kind of pick up stuff as long as they go, and kind of so it's kind of cool. But when you actually think about what the whole part, it completely breaks down. But again, I'm not even talking about Harfoots, because who really wants to talk about the Harfoots? But so, putting the map aside here, we have the Harfoots. Who are they? What are they doing? So we have the 4 little people, and we have the giant. What does that mean? We have Nori, which is short for Eleanor, but everyone just calls her Nori. Nori is kind of like our female Frodo equivalent, where she's kind of has this, like, views the world in this sort of this different way. And she has this idea that, like, like some things, like should be done a certain way, like some great adventure awaits, and she feel like she should do something right and better and see what's on the world. So that's kind of like our Frodo character. We have kind of like our female Samwise character, and that's Poppy right there. By the way, like Nori is holding an apple. That's what that's supposed to be right there. They're not really for anything in particular. It's just for some reason there's an odd symmetry of her holding apples for some reason. So that was the first thing that came to my mind. Nori, so that's Nori right over there. Poppy is holding a lantern. That's what that's supposed to be, because she's kind of like the female Samwise character. She's kind of like the light to that guides Frodo along the path. Like she's kind of like helps Nori along in that area where she is like her Samwise, or she's trying to her rock and trying to get her and guide her along there. So that's why she's holding the lantern. And that's Poppy. So Nori and Poppy, kind of from the start, like they can see they're a bit friends already from the start. And they kind of get into shenanigans and trying to figure out what's going on, and they kind of get into trouble with sort of like the elders of the Harfoot community, which is Sadok, or Sadok, depending on how you pronounce it. He's holding the book right there, because he's kind of controls the histories, the lore. Though he kind of like watches the stars to see what times and seasons it's time to, like, they can do their migratory path or whatever. So that's Sadok. He has the book, and we have Malva, who is sort of like so if he's kind of sort of like the patriarch of the family, she's like the matriarch. That's why she kind of got like the staff as well. So she's kind of like the guide, like the shepherd, which can like help guide people, but also they need to like beat some sense into these whippersnappers. So that's what she is. I think that they're married. It's kind of established that they're kind of like a couple, but I don't. Again, it's so memorable. I don't really know that for detail. So we have Sadok and Malva. So they're kind of like the guardians of like sort of the Harfoot community, and shenanigans that they're trying to get of Nori and Poppy in there. Again, there are two other characters, which are Nori's mom and dad, but I had to look that up on my computer over here on the table back there. Apparently, it is Largo and Marigold, for those of you who want to take notes. But for everyone that I've known, it's just known as Nori's dad and Nori's mom. Talking about each individual episode, trying to keep a brief recap about this one here. Signs and portents, that's how I call it, because what do they call it again in this one? They call it a shadow of the past. Yeah, no, I call it signs and portents. Here we go. Signs of Sauron's rise and disappearance. So, again, these things are written in blue, so it takes place of the arc of what happens in Numenor over here. Hope you can see it fine. So, Sauron's rise and disappearance. Set up that Sauron was risen to power, and he had a whole vast army of orcs. Galadriel's brother, Finrod, who he's in there for like about 5 minutes. He dies in the battle. So her brother, Galadriel's brother, dies in a battle against Sauron, and so this really motivates her to pick up where he left off, to avenge her brother. So vengeance is kind of her main motivating factor here. We'll get into that. Galadriel motivated by vengeance. So this is Sauron's rise and now disappearance. So, the elves have come together, they've fighting against him, and they achieve a nice victory against him, and then suddenly he's gone. Like, he vanishes, disappears. And so Galadriel is kind of sent to go see and hunt down Sauron, who she thinks has escaped somewhere. So she's trying to figure out where he might be, hunt down any of the orcs. And for who knows, centuries, she might have figured out that no sign of Sauron or pretty much any orcs have been discovered in that time period. And so the idea is, I'm like, okay, is he, really gone at this point? Like, we as the audience know he's not. But, as far as, their world building that they're signing, like, maybe he's gone. Like, maybe he's actually truly is dead or disappeared or whatever. Finrod's dagger right here, that is because when Finrod died, Galadriel took his particular weapon, which was his dagger, and that's the one that she kind of wants to just impale into Sauron right there. So that's the connection that she has to her brother, who she lost. It's kind of a mentor, because there's a little bit of a prologue at the beginning, which we won't get into, of like when she was just a child and her brother was kind of mentoring her and gives her actually really terrible advice, but this is a brief summation here. Galadriel finds signs of Sauron in Fortress. So, Sauron, we had signs of his rise, and then he seemed to disappear. We haven't seen any sign of him lately. Now we find a sign of Sauron in Fortress. So, in her meanderings of trying to hunt down Sauron, she comes to this very hidden, long abandoned fortress that Sauron seemed to have. And so, hunting down this fortress, they come into it, and they come to this like forge area where I believe it's on an anvil. They find that there is this symbol, a secret symbol emblazed onto it, and it is, again, I apologize for my drawing, this is kind of like a stylized picture of it right here, but you know, you get the general idea of what it kind of looks like right here. And during the actual, because now of course now we know what it is, but you know, for people who weren't aware, there was a bunch of speculation as to what could this symbol possibly mean. And for some of us, we thought it was Morgoth's crown, because for those of us who know some of the lore, that Morgoth, the original Dark Lord, stole the 3 Silmarils and placed the 3 into his crown. And so we're thinking like, oh, okay, is this supposed to be like something that, you know, is onto his head, so like this is some sort of like his allegiance to Morgoth back there. So, but interestingly enough, I happened to go to images on the internet, and I just typed in Sauron symbol or symbol of Sauron, and you know, most things that pop up is, you know, like the eye of Sauron. And interestingly enough, I happened to come across this particular image that I'll put in the editing, and it's like, okay, you know, if with some work, you know, it kinda, if you flip it upside down, it kinda looks like it a little bit, you know, like it's kind of missing the whole bottom section, but you know, it's like a stylized version of one eye, so maybe it's like the early forms of what the eye is, and then, you know, like, you know, as the show progresses, you know, it becomes the fully formed of what you think. I don't know, so you know, like, it's possible, so it's like, okay, how exactly do you interpret this symbol? Because this symbol is first found on Finrod's body, the brother of Galadriel. When she gets her brother's body back, she finds this symbol carved onto his like chest or shoulder area. And so it's like, this is like some dark mark of Sauron that he wants to leave behind to either like send a message or something. Obviously it means something. It's some dark, ominous sign or portent here. So it's like, what does it mean? And she has to find this same symbol on this forge in this sort of abandoned fortress. So she thinks like, okay, we have just found something big. We need to go ahead and report back to see what's happening. Gil-galad, you know, who she's kind of like reporting back to, says that like, hey, listen, it looks like the fortress was abandoned. That symbol was probably left years ago. You know, we haven't really seen anything. You know, it's probably nothing. Which, again, they try to hand wave it away to say like, okay, this is a possibility. But may I remind everyone, hey, Gil-galad, you have had stationed Arondir and a whole bunch of elves in a garrison to watch the Southlands, so that for the slight possibility that the generational descendants of the original people who sided with Morgoth might turn evil, that you've had this right here, but when Galadriel comes to you saying that, say, hey, there's some deep stuff going on right there, we might need to take a look at this, you say, nah, it's fine. Again, one of the things why Gil-galad in this show is an idiot. In the lore, he's a badass. In this show, So, that takes care of the blue stuff there. Now we are into black right here. Signs of time drawing near for migration. So we're with the Harfoots now. So Sadok, our lore master, right here, he's kind of got his book out. He's looking around for seeing the signs of the times. He's keeping an eye on the stars. He's saying, okay, it's around that time. Hey everybody, it's time for the migration to start happening, get packing, get stuff ready. So that's happening over there. It is time to disband the Watchtower. So Arondir in the Southland has given word that the garrison of the Southlands is to disband. So that they're now no longer take place over the Southlands. I'm assuming to return home to whichever homes they apparently each went to. So Arondir is kind of in a position, so like, okay, on the one hand, Southlanders probably nice to have the elves gone, but Arondir kind of likes Bronwyn here, our herbalist, So like, okay, what does he do? Does he want to go back home? Did he have a life back then? So that's that. So what is he gonna do? Then we go, here's what Gil-galad says it's time to go to Valinor. So King Gil-galad says, we haven't seen any sign of evil happening down. Galadriel, you have performed admirably. We know that you've been hurt deeply because your brother died, by the hands of Sauron. We feel that, like the greatest healing that can achieve to you now is to go off west into the great lands of Valinor. Like the Undying Lands, which usually way over there. If you remember, if we had the map there, we didn't see the Undying Lands, but the Undying Lands like way over there. So we're gonna sail west, and like get the the comfort and healing that you need, because I don't know if you can actually receive it here to quench your vengeance. Again, why they went with that arc. So some of the reasoning behind this is because that's something that we won't really dive into much, but apparently there is some sort of dark, cancerous, black magic that's sort of affecting the trees near Lindon, where Gil-galad is, over in the west, on the western shores over there. And Gil-galad's idea for combating this is that, like, because we have been so consumed by strife and war that we need to get rid of all vestments of war, and sort of like our main heroes like Galadriel and stuff like that, that they need to be sent home, and then hopefully this will stop the spread. Does anyone figure out a problem with this? So like, okay, in order to stop any particular evil from arising, you are going to throw away all of your machines, your vestments, your people of war. Okay, so when the orc army comes and marches into your city, they'll be like, thank you, I guess, for completely getting rid of all of your weapons? Like, how exactly does that make sense? So again, reasons why Gil-galad is an idiot in this show. But anyway, he says there's no signs of things happening, so we're gonna send Galadriel away. So Galadriel is put on a boat and sent off to the west into Valinor. So there's that one there. Back to red. Portent of dark deeds in Southlands. Yes, now we're gonna see like everything seems to be all fine and dandy here, but Arondir, our pointy elf ranger hunter, goes to Bronwyn to like kind of say his goodbye, saying like, hey, like we've kind of been disbanded, we're all going home. When I'm saying goodbye, like, okay, he kind of has that little confliction of whether he wants to go or not. But before things, can actually like progress and say goodbye, a person comes to Bronwyn, the herbalist healer, and is kind of like, hey, my cow was kind of a bit sick, where something's not quite right. We're wondering if you could take a look at him. And, kudos, like, this was like the one scene that actually made me actually feel something. We're supposed to feel like something dark and ominous is happening, and they achieved it. So, one scene that got right on the show. The cow looks, like, not too sickly. I mean, it looks like maybe like a little thin and like weak or something, but Bronwyn was going around, so like I don't sense a fever or anything, and maybe either because of Arondir, because of his like elven intuition or insight, he goes down and tries to like squeeze, get some milk out of there, and the visual image of this whatever black sludgy tar squeezing out of this cow's udder was like, okay, that's messed up. Things are really bad happening here. So okay, good on for like the one scene that actually made me feel something. So that one there. They go and try and find out what happened. So they're trying to figure some logical explanation. Like, okay, well, where was the cow grazing? So like, did she eat something? Something. So they like, I think she was over in this direction. So they go over to the nearby village. From not their village in the Southlands, but a nearby one, and they find that village burned. They find like some sort of like buildings are like broken and down. There's the animals are sort of killed, and all the people are missing. So like, okay, something definitely is going down here. This is a very bad sign happening right now. Cut to the Galadriel. This is now actually kind of begins the whole Numenor, actually an actual Numenor arc, because signs it's time to stay in Valinor. So Galadriel has been on the boat, and she's been sailing off into the west. for who knows how long it takes to get to Valinor. Based on the maps that I have seen, I mean, let's see if I can put a map up here right now. It seems like it's going to be quite a distance from there, because I'm like, okay, based on from what we know of Middle Earth, there's a tiny little Middle Earth right here. You can kind of see where, like, okay, that's kind of where Mordor is, that's where the Misty Mountains is. You can probably figure out where Gondor, that's where the Shire is, for some of you know, like, okay, and all the way over there is Valinor on the Undying Lands. So I'm like, you have this big ocean right here that you have to cross from here. So, getting the map out of the way here. So, you have to sail the entire thing over there. But apparently in the show, it only just takes a couple of hours, apparently. Because time is irrelevant in the show. I'll get into that. But, so they go off to the Undying Lands, the Valinor, and this sort of golden portal, like, sort of like opens up. There's music, there's light coming out, so I'm like, okay, kind of, there's an actual shore that you can land on and dock the boat and get off, but apparently they want to do like a mysterious golden portal in the sky. So anyway, Galadriel believes that her work is not yet finished. She thinks that Sauron is still out there. She feels like she was kind of put on the boat unwillingly, and so at the very last second, you know, she says it's time for her to stay in Valinor. So as the boat is about to be fully swallowed up, she jumps off, dives into the water, and lets the boat continue on. Now she's left behind. When she's alone in the ocean, all the way over in Valinor. So what's her plan? It's quite easy, actually. She's just going to swim all the way back to Middle Earth. No problem. I mean, yes, this is quite the logic that we have right here. This is the first episode, by the way. And so, I don't know whether they think that Galadriel is just such a badass that she's able to do this, or whether they was just logic is beyond them. Probably the latter. But this is what they win with. And finally, we end up with the final, you know, portents of, like, ominous, is that the portent of meteor crashing near Harfoots. Now, I don't know if Galadriel actually sees the meteor crashing, but I know that the elves in Lindon, Gil-galad sees it, the Southlanders kind of see it because it's right next to it, and the Harfoots, because the meteor kind of crashes in that sort of Brownlands region, kind of where the Harfoots were by, because Nori and Poppy are, you know, female Frodo and Sam characters kind of like make a little trek over there, and they can find the meteor, so it's like really close to them. That's why it's in black right there. But, you know, most of the people can actually see it, of this ominous one of this meteor coming down and crashing down into Middle Earth. And what's the big reveal is that, oh, there's actually a person in the meteor. And so that's the, like, okay, so who is this big stranger that has come and crash landed into Middle Earth right here? So that is basically episode 1, signs and portents. A lot of signs and stuff like things are like, what's happening here? Episode 2, they call it Adrift. Yeah, that only applies to Galadriel because she's the only one that's adrift. But I call it Friends and Enemies. So, blue here. Galadriel meets Halbrand on Splintered Raft. And no, that is not some cool D&D tavern that people go to get some epic quests. No, that Splintered Raft is literally what it means. It's like she's a swimming. She's a swimming on that, and as she comes along, she comes across this wreckage of this sort of boat. And there's a bunch of stragglers on there, you know, survivors, and one of them is Halbrand. But because since he is a main character, nothing bad is going to happen to him, because there's a sea serpent that comes in, you know, destroys most of the boat, and, you know, Galadriel and Halbrand are the only ones left. So now they're actually on a splintered raft. It was kind of boat-shaped at one point with I think about like half a dozen people on there. Now it's just Galadriel and Halbrand at this point right here. So that's when Elrond and Celebrimbor meet. So about friends and enemies. So Galadriel meets Halbrand. We quick cut away from there to go to Elrond and Celebrimbor. So like, are Galadriel and Halbrand, is he a friend or is he not? You know, like, ho ho, friends and enemies. That's what I call it. Elrond and Celebrimbor meet. So back to the elves. So Elrond goes to Celebrimbor, the elven smith. And so they are friends for quite a long time. Because they're elves, they have long lifespans. And so they discuss a forge option. So you're thinking, oh, hey, finally, maybe we can actually discuss some actual Rings of Power, because, the show is called Rings of Power. We can actually get to the guy who made the Rings of Power, which, by the way, this entire first episode of setting up your world of Rings of Power, not once is there referenced any sort of rings or power, or even the guy who makes the Rings of Power mentioned. Moving on. So Elrond and Celebrimbor, they're friends. They're deep friends. Elrond goes to find Durin. So Elrond is friends with Prince Durin, because he believes that Prince Durin here with the hammer can help Celebrimbor, the elf with the hammer. Because they're have their smithing, they have to build a forge that can build, and I know what you're thinking, maybe this is the forge that like Mike, because Celebrimbor wants this forge that's bigger and better than anyone's ever seen. Because Celebrimbor is like the master smith of the age right now. And so oh, maybe this is going to be the one where they're going to breathe the Rings of Power. I don't think so. For those of you who have seen all the episodes, correct me if I'm wrong, do we actually see the finished product of that? I know there's some shots where we see it being constructed in the background, but do we actually ever go to that forge and make the Rings of Power, or does it all happen in Celebrimbor's one? Right? So I'm pretty sure this is just some random plot that they happen to be like, hey, we need a forge, and the Rings of Power aren't even forged there, as far as my knowledge. So Elrond goes to find Durin to help construct this forge, because hey, maybe get the best of elves and best of dwarves working on there. That eventually leads nowhere. But so Elrond, our diplomat, goes to Prince Durin, and we find that the dwarves don't really want to help. So maybe not friends. They're not really enemies, the elves and the dwarves, but there doesn't seem to be they're not really friends right now. So, not friends, not enemies. So what are they? Nori, curious about stranger and wants to help. So, Nori, this is where sort of the apple motif comes in. There's a lot of apples now. So, she meets the stranger, and the stranger is a very, because he's he's human. She's halfling or Harfoot, so there's a big size difference here. That's why there's a size difference here. So he is he just crashed in a meteor. He seems to have no memory recollection of what happened to him, what he's supposed to do, why he's there. He doesn't really understand language. He doesn't really know what's supposed to be the cultural norms, what's going on. So he's kind of like a bumbling fool, and Nori is trying to help him see okay, these are the things these are what certain words mean. Trying to give him some basic form of language. So okay, maybe it seems like Nori and the stranger are kind of becoming friends. Maybe. Halbrand chased from home by orcs. So we cut back to the Numenorian story arc, where Galadriel and Halbrand are together on the splintered raft. Not the tavern. And so, Halbrand, he, says a lot, he mentions his name, hi, I'm Halbrand, she's Galadriel. Kind of goes to the well, how did you get here? So I'm well, okay, this is how I got here. Well, how did you get here? And he says that he was chased away from home by orcs. So, okay, Halbrand, orcs, not friends. Definitely not. Again, this breaks into another question. I'm hold on a second. So you have been searching for any signs of orcs. You haven't seen any. And yet, apparently there's been such a sighting of orcs that they have chased away Halbrand and whatever sort of village or town community that he was in away, so that he's now at sea. So apparently there's a whole ton of orcs around here, but the elves haven't seen any. Again, but get used to contradictions in the show here. So, Halbrand tries to wave home from orcs. There we go. Now we have an orc attack at Bronwyn's home. So, Arondir, after seeing that the village has been burned down in the first episode, he goes off to investigate. Hey, I'm supposed to, even though our garrison is disbanded, it's still kind of my job to see what's going on and making sure people are safe. So he goes off to investigate. Bronwyn our female herbalist, decides to go home and try to warn the people, see like what's going on. So we have a couple of things happen here. The blade is found. So Bronwyn's son, Theo, he is kind of predominantly the one being attacked because he has found a very ominous, dark, I don't know if it's fully Morgul blade, but yeah, it's not good, shall we say. So yeah, definitely the sword, bad news. That's an enemy, right? So he finds the sword, when I say a sword, he finds a hilt of a sword. It's kind of like, think of it like Narsil, where it's got like a very elaborate hilt and then like a bit of a blade. And cool thing is that it seems to be activated by blood. Like the moment you like stab something or slice your hand and it like feeds off of blood. I think of it kind of like the Sword of Cass, and that and then it like blade sort of like grows and forms into actual sword right there. So that's pretty cool. So we have Theo finding this blade, so that's why he has a sword now. Probably not the sword that he was originally thinking of having, but hey, he's got a sword now. And so then the orc actually attacks Bronwyn's home because there seems to be like so it seems like they've been attacking the first village, and now it seems like we've had our first signs of orcs in their village right now. And so then now the Southlanders were, like saying like, hey, we haven't seen anything. Now there's an actual orc. Good news is, Bronwyn and Theo survived. They happen to kill the orc. They show the body to the Southlanders and like, hey, it looks like orcs are here. We need to do something about it. But also along the same, we have Arondir is captured. So Arondir, our elf, who's going from the burned village off to see the tunnels that was kind of the secret tunnels that the orcs seem to have going through, and he finds that some things have been happening on, and surprise, armors reach out and capture him, and he's gone. Woof. So we'll find out in episode 3 what happens. So it seems like there's a lot of enemies going on right here. Back to Galadriel in Storm is saved by Halbrand. So yes, while they're on the raft, they've already been attacked by the sea serpents. Now there's like a storm coming in, and so they're now like, okay, we're on a raft here. We kind of have somewhat of a makeshift, sail, and I think it was a mast at one point. It's like a broken off thing right there. It's not at all. It's like I think it's like only 8 or 10 feet tall. But it's got some rigging on there, so we're trying to catch us up. But they're trying to survive the storm going on right here. Lightning strikes the mast that Galadriel, in her wisdom, thought like, hey, maybe I should, I don't want to be tossed around by the storm. I'm going to tie myself to the mast. So okay, fairly good point. But apparently, lightning strikes the mast, and so it like sunders it, and so she's still tied to it, and she gets cast out into the ocean. And she is drowning, so she's sinking into the water. Let me rephrase that. Galadriel is sinking in the water when she is strapped to a wooden mast. Not to play the game of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but when Sir Bedivere, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, sorry, when Sir Bedivere asks the idiots, there's a simple question: does wood sink in water? They all know that no, it floats. So could someone explain to me why Galadriel and a wooden mast is sinking? Unless, of course, that the showrunners are trying to get across that Galadriel is just such dead weights that she's pulling the mast down with her. But I don't think that's what's going on there. That would be, that honestly should be what happened, but no. But yeah, apparently wood sinks in this universe. So yeah, that's another thing that I was like, probably like, what the heck is happening here? But anyway, physics. She is sinking down to there. Halbrand dives in over there, and he tries to save her. And with the use of, because she still has Galadriel's dagger, he pulls it out and he, cuts the ropes, and he's able to free her up, and they're going over there. And miraculously pops up right next to the raft in the middle of a storm. I don't know about you, but if you've ever seen a raging storm and you get separated from your boat and you have to come back into the water, the odds of you coming up right where the boat is, I'm like, you in the stormy waters are moving around and this boat is moving around, and the odds of you trying to get and your boat back together again, nigh impossible. Think of any storm movie that happened, okay? So again, physics out the window. But Halbrand seems to save Galadriel, so hey, maybe friend. You know, like he's like, but also, it's a little bit of the thing right here that I don't know if I want to discuss about this here, but you know, it's like, so okay, maybe it's about sympathizing that, like, okay, maybe Halbrand here has some, you know, like some decent human qualities that they, you know, like that he should save someone, but it's also kind of implying that Halbrand may have the hots for Galadriel. But I mean, you know, being Galadriel, I mean, who wouldn't? But in this universe, I mean, they set it up because Galadriel, jumping into the ocean, she's wearing this sort of white dress. And by the way, ladies, swimming in a dress, like, how difficult is that? Because I've never done it. But I would assume like there's got to be a lot more difficulty with have your whole arms and legs and tying out in the cloth coming together. Let me know. So like anyway, so she does that and so she is like soaking wet in this dress. It's white. It's also somewhat see-through. So I was like, I don't know about this. And you kind of see Halbrand kind of eyeing her up. There's a little bit like he can kind of make out some of that nice elven figure in there. I was like, Tolkien. Like, maybe this work in some other sort of fantasy show, but, you know, Tolkien, it just didn't seem right for me. But, anyway, so there's that. Back to the stranger. He discovers his power and, in the process, kills fireflies. Yes, he finds out something that he is trying to, a stranger here, is trying to communicate with Nori, our female Frodo character. And that he is able to sort of communicate with some of the animals here, and he's got all these fireflies flying about, and he's able to communicate with the fireflies, and they're able to swarm up in little clusters, and it seems to form like some sort of constellation up in the sky. And so he's like, okay, he's looking for stars, and so like at least Nori thinks, I'm like, oh hey, well I know someone who kind of watches the stars, even knows stars, so she might give us her. But in the process of him trying to pose them to show all of these fireflies, all of a sudden like his power is released. And all the fireflies just whoomp, dead. So it's like, okay, maybe not quite the friend we were thinking he was, you know, like, and of course, you know, Nori is always our Poppy right here is thinking, you know, like, what just happened? Like, he just killed all of these things, and of course, Nori's like, I don't think he did it on purpose. It was kind of accidentally. But then it's like, okay, like, how do you know, girls? You know, like, you know, Poppy's bringing up some points. You know, Nori as well. But, you know, like, so the stranger is like, he's, you know, developing his sort of, discovering what he's all about. So, friend, maybe enemy, who knows? Southlanders pack up for the Watchtower. So, now that they have actual proof that there's a dead orc in their own village, right now, you know, we have Bronwyn and Theo telling about the whole different there. They go to Waldrick's tavern. That's where they kind of present the body and the head, and so like, hey, you people, I know this is you guys, you know, weren't, you know, fully on board with this, but hey, listen to what's going on. And so Waldrick is all like, yeah, we should probably do something about it. And their best course of action, I will give them this, of the courses of action they should do. So I'm like, okay, so if staying here is not the best option, what options do you have? You have option 1. You can flee to the enemy and surrender. Option 2. You can flee to the Elven Watchtower that they know is empty because the elves are disbanded. Option 3, you can fully leave the entire region and go live in an entirely new home away from where all these are happening. Or option 4 is that you could just not leave at all and just try and stay here, fortify, and weather it out. So they make the smart choice. Southlanders pack up for the Watchtower. So they know that, you know, because the elves are disbanded, you know, they've all left. It's like, hey, there's this place of fortification right here, you know, so like, let's go over there. You know, like, so, okay, so they all pack up what they need to do. They all pack up what they need. We'll get to that one. What they pack. But, so they all decide, like, okay, you know what, maybe it's not safe here in our village. Let's all go to the fortress. You know, it's a watchtower, but it's got like a little wall section. It's got a gatehouse. It's got a bridge. that the only entrance there. So it qualifies as like a very tiny like mini fortress. So I'm like, you know, it's quite decent. You know, I have a document that I'll eventually show you of what a basic look of it, because I can't find images on the internet. So I made the fortress up in SketchUp, and I'll show you that eventually. So they go into that one. But I'm calling it a fortress because that's kind of what it is. But you know, fortress, watchtower. Hopefully you understand what I'm talking about here. So the Southlanders pack up for the watchtower because there seems there's a lot of enemies being around, being the orcs. And finally, Galadriel and Halbrand are rescued by a mysterious ship. So finally, we get the idea of what Numenor finally revving up, because you know we kind of already figured out like, oh, maybe this is probably a Numenorian ship that picks them up along the way on their whatever voyages. They see this raft and they save them up there. So the idea of like, okay, Numenorians, we don't really know they're Numenorians yet, but okay, these mysterious people, are they friends or are they enemies? So that is episode 1 and 2. Signs of importance, friends and enemies. Yeah, again, a shadow of the past and adrift. So yeah, like some of it was a part of being adrift, but you know, there's a lot of things going on now, going on to 3 and 4. On to episode 3, Secrets and Lies. But they call it Adar. That's the name that they give it for you. Again, that only is relevant to the Southlands, but then there's a whole bunch of blue in here. So again, why they would call that? So anyway, Secrets and Lies, that's what I call it there. We get the revelation of orc tunnels carved by slaves. So yes, okay, so you know, we kind of the village burned and all the inhabitants were missing. Yet we kind of secret revealed. We found out where they were. The orcs apparently have been capturing them, and they're making slaves for their tunnels. Because if I didn't mention that, the reason that it was kind of weird about the whole Southlanders disappearing is because they didn't see anything really. But they had these tunnel networks, and they kind of just pop up out from the house, underneath the houses right there, and that's kind of like the way of like, where did all these people go? And so that's why Arondir, our elf, kind of found one of these holes and found these tunnels, and that's how he got captured there. So he has found the secret that there are these orc tunnels being built, and they've captured a lot of people. And apparently there are hundreds, if not thousands, of orcs here. So like, things is getting real here. Also, you know, the reason that they have tunnels is kind of one to help hide their, you know, doings of what's going on, but also apparently they are like vampires from Twilight, and that they are vampires in the way that their skin will peel, blister, and just melt off when they're in the presence of the sun. So there are a sense of vampires like that, but also in lights of Twilight, specifically Breaking Dawn Part 2. If you saw my previous video of the Tolkien lore versus the Rings of Power, is that, you know, the visual effects artists, you know, might not catch them, like, either whether they give up or don't care, and that, like, in that particular movie, you know, Edward Cullen and the vampires, sometimes they sparkle, sometimes they don't, you know, and this one, you know, like, when they're in the sun, you know, sometimes the sun hurts them, sometimes they don't. So again, contradiction prevalent throughout all this one. So they have orc tunnels to kind of help shield themselves from sunlight, and to also kind of see what's going on to help them and keep the various deeds quiet. So, secret. Shh. Galadriel and Halbrand arrive at Numenor. Again, this is not really much of a secret, you know, yeah, they arrive. But it's funny because the way they set this up here, where is it? Yes. Because, you know, Galadriel and Halbrand, because of the storm, they're, like, exhausted, so they're kind of, like, unconscious on the raft, and then the ship kind of picks them up. And they're kind of figuring, like, where are we? What's going on? So they make it, so they go up to the deck of the ship, and they meet what seems to be the captain, and they just draw out the whole secrecy of those sort of. Here we have, this is them talking to the captain. What vessel is this? And the captain goes, you know, which we will later find out to be Elendil, the tall, you know, our warrior, gotta go right here, Numenorian. Be at ease. I am obliged to deliver you to my betters. Which, okay, if you're trying to get to say them like, hey, you know, don't worry, you know, all questions will be answered when we get back home, okay, but you could just answer the question, say, like, hey, this is the, you know, Numenorian ship, the HMS Reliant, you know, we're sailing to Numenor, we're about to dock in 20 minutes, all your questions will be answered. You know, you could just say that, but no, they had to draw out the surprise here, you know, it's a secret of what's happening. So, what vessel is this? Be at ease, I am obliged to deliver you to my betters. To what port do we sail? See for yourself, we are almost there. Nearly where? home. Like at this point, I would be like, okay, you have to be more helpful. Could you just answer the question, please? So again, it's like, ooh, secret, we're arriving in Numenor. So again, like there's some fun dialogue right there. Discovery that Halbrand likes/wants to forge. So okay, we have our Halbrand, our stranded individual, kind of nobody, who we may be kind of suspecting to be what's going on here, because like is he a friend? Is he not? Well. Might be something that he is an enemy, because we're about the lies here, because like discovers that Halbrand wants to forge. So, is this a secret? Is this a lie? Because, based on what they've told us in the show, separating from anything Tolkien, we're thinking like, okay, maybe he just wants to settle down, have a home. I mean, he's obviously impressed with these, Numenorians. There's a lot of things like, hey, they got some forges. Maybe he wants to have his life. Maybe he has a past that he wants to start over again, so hey. But then again, this is called Rings of Power. And if we're watching the Rings of Power, we kind of have some idea of the Tolkien lore, and that we want to see the Rings of Power made. Which, if we know some of the lore, that is, we know that Sauron, in his fair form of Anatar, goes to Celebrimbor, the Elven Smith, and teaches him the ways of forging certain things, and he increases his knowledge to make these Rings of Power, which would eventually be the 7 to the dwarves and the 9 to the men, so that he would eventually control all of them. So when you have suddenly this mysterious man with unexplained background, looks very, suave, sexy man coming in, and all of a sudden he wants to forge something, like he really kind of wants to, make something here, I'm like, okay, is this supposed to be like a misdirect here? Or is Amazon and whoever the writer is trying to be subtle? And say, I'm like, ooh, shh, they'll never suspect that if this is Sauron, they'll never suspect it coming. I'm like, guys, you're not really being that subtle, but okay. We're gonna go okay, possible candidate of maybe Sauron thrown into the mix of the whole bunch that we have here, because we had Adar, which we'll get to later. That's one. We have the Stranger, he's eventually one. So okay, who is Sauron? Again, why didn't they just go with here's Anatar, he's trying to make the rings, go, enjoy. Because some of us know all this. So anyway, he wants to forge something. Are we discovering some secrets about him? Or is he kind of lying about this one because he's secretly Sauron? I don't know. We'll eventually find out. Arondir. Okay, back to the Southlands. Arondir, our elf who was captured by the orcs and having their tunnels. He discovers that orcs are looking for weapon. That gets convoluted. Again, watch part 2 of this one, where I discuss the in-depth review of these 4 episodes specifically of the Southland arc and how that just does not work. But anyway, the orcs are looking for something. They're looking for a weapon. Gee, I wonder what it could possibly be. What weapon have we found recently that is of uber dark significance near the Southlands that some plucky young hero may have found? Wonder. Maybe the Dark Morgul Blade that activates with blood? Anyway, we meet Adar. Well, we don't meet Adar. He is mentioned. The orcs mention a leader. Their leader, Adar. And so they are suspecting that, okay, maybe because the elves, the orcs, the friends of Arondir. Yeah, by the way, some of his fellow men from the garrison, on their way to traveling home, apparently they got captured as well, so he meets some of friends, so hey, friends reunite, see if they can band together, and so they are trying to figure out who this Adar guy is, and so they postulate, well, Sauron has had many names, maybe this is Sauron. Again, kind of okay, so now we have a Halbrand who might be Sauron, now we have an Adar who might be Sauron, this whole Sauron mystery of who is Sauron? It's pretty obvious once we even go into episode 4. So we're looking for a weapon, and we talk about Adar. Arondir chops tree to discover their location. So, the orcs have this, I don't say tunnel, because tunnel necessarily means they're fully underground and they have something, enclosure over them. Well, they actually do have an enclosure, but it's more like a big trench that they have right there. And they have this sort of wooden posts and beams with tarp and cloth over them to help cover themselves, because it's a fairly wide trench for all the kind of slaves that they have going into there. and they have this big tree that's kind of in their way. And so like, okay, Arondir, being an elf, you know, like, okay, maybe he has some kind of like, maybe can we just go around the tree? We don't have to chop it down. But no, the orcs are like, no, we chop it down. And in this, I'm like, hey, listen, if we go up to the tree to try and chop it, maybe we can go see what's around, see what's going on. And so that we're not down here in the trench, we can get some surveillance to see maybe we can plan an escape. So, you know, that's that whole kind of thing of where he's like, discover the location, seeing if they can get someone to escape, because if at least a couple can escape, then they can probably know where their garrison is at. They can probably get word to somebody else and they can bring reinforcements. So, you know, like, okay, now as I'm like, okay, we're discovering some secrets. Let's see if we can survive here. So that's the Arondir going on in the Southlands there. Back to Numenor. Elendil takes Galadriel to the Hall of Lore. So this is where we get an epic horse riding sequence. Yes, Galadriel is a horse girl, confirmed. Galadriel is looking for more information, kind of specifically on kind of like Halbrand, and you know, like, because she's, you know, all still on this quest to find Sauron. Elendil, the Tall, our warrior, decides to take Galadriel to the Hall of Lore, where, you know, like the library, the information is all there. So he goes there, and we have an epic moment of horse riding sequence, and it just goes on forever. Like, you think of like, okay, you know, like the scene is getting long, you know, like let's wrap it up. I'm like, not until you've seen this one. We have a extended sequence of just panning shots of the horses, both Elendil and Galadriel riding their horses. You know, it seems like, okay, here they are riding on a path near these green fields. Now they're by the forest. Now they're on the beach. And I'm like, okay, we're moving to the House of Lore, and then, oh no, then the slow-mo kicks, and then we get to see the homes on the beach in the moist sand, and it's pounding those, and we can go there. I'm like, we're not done yet. And then we get to see the head of the horse as it's charging, and we see the nostrils flaring as we see the reins like on the mane flowing behind it. We're not done yet. And then we go to we're going to see the nice hindquarters of the horse as Galadriel is on the horse. And I don't know why we're focusing on this, but we are looking, charging forward. We're not done yet. And then we finally get a nice close-up of Galadriel as she's smiling. Is she smiling? I don't know. If you've seen some of the images, it's like, I feel bad for Morfydd Clark, the actress who plays her, because I'm like, okay, there's a lot of images going on of some of the faces that she makes, and this is one of them. And so I'm like, I think you're going for smiling, but it doesn't really go. But again, yeah, we're still holding on to this horse. The entire time I've been talking, we're still in slow-mo right here, so I'm like, yeah, it just goes forever. So thankfully, we're out of that one there. We're going into Halbrand, which, Halbrand schemes to get... Sorry, that should be blue. I apologize. That I don't know why I put that in red. That is not happening in the summon. Halbrand is here in the Numenor arc. So forget that. Halbrand schemes, to get forging accomplished. So, yes, Halbrand is really kind of wanting to stay in Numenor for a bit, trying to get his forging accomplished. So again, I'm like, okay, is this a secret that he really actually wants to be accomplished, or is he lying about other things? Is this Sauron here? But again, kind of on the scheming of the lies is that he trying to figure out how to stay in Numenor and become part of the forging team. They say you had to become part of the guild. So I'm like, okay, well, how do I do it? Well, you have to be in the process of acquiring a guild crest. And so I figure out how to do that. I'm like, okay, well, maybe if I can make some friends, maybe I can sidle up to them, you know, get acquainted, maybe get some drinks going, and then I can, you know, quickly relieve a certain guild crest off of some individuals. Let's just say he does, but then again, they find out, so then there's a scuffle. There's sort of like a tussle in the street right there. The guards come in, and, you know, they obviously accuse Halbrand of the one, you know, starting in front of us, so that he kind of actually gets arrested, and he's in jail now. Not for long. So that one is trying to get his forging thing done. Uber big reveal at Hall of Lore. This is where the episode breaks all logic completely. So she's Galadriel, along with Elendil, is at the Hall of Lore now. Thank God the force writing sequence is done. And so she comes up and she says, okay, listen, I have this, you know, sort of symbol. She kind of draws like her own version of it. You know, so like, okay, can you tell me anything about this? And so like the guy, the Lord Master shall be the one who the library, or whatever, was it like, hey, listen, I'll do my best. I'll see what I can find. And so then he comes back, and he has like some like notes and books, and she goes and takes one look at it, and seeing her, and basically, I'm not joking. This is what happens. I'm seeing if I can do my best for you. She goes, I must be blind. This is no sigil. Turns around, there just happens to be a map conveniently behind her, and she holds it up, and for those of you, let's put up a map of Middle Earth here. Alright, take it away. Does this thing look familiar? Again, put it up again. And take it away. Yeah, this is the map of the mountains of Mordor. This is kind of like the going into where like Minas Tirith is over here. This is kind of like an idea of what Mount Doom is like. Yeah, that's what this is. So, this is where it breaks down. So, we find out that the Númenóreans have this information because a spy wrote this down in the Black Tongue, whoever how many years ago, trying to warn people about this. And apparently, Númenor did not bother to read this, however many decades it happened ago. So, again, why would they not read this? And why haven't they done anything about this? But may I remind everybody that this symbol, carved like this, was branded into Finrod's body. The brother that Galadriel had, and she goes, so she knows full well she's had this image for hundreds of years, and she never once thought to look at a map. So I'm like, you had all this time to try and figure this out. What the heck? So, that's the uber big reveal at the Hall of Lore, which completely breaks the show. We cut to the Harfoots, who stick together. That's a lie. Harfoots do not stick together. They, Sadok, has this book, and he reads off a list of names of people, the Harfoots, that they have purposefully left behind to die, but don't worry, we will remember you. They're horrible. Don't want to talk about them more. Moving on. Halbrand revealed to be Southland King. Okay, this is, again, is this a secret reveal? Like, oh, we're going to get more truth? Or is this more a lie? What is this? She finds that the Halbrand has sort of like a talisman that he has on him. And during their time, she notices when they were on, like, shipwrecked on the raft right there. And so while she's at the Hall of Lore, she happens to look to also, I'm assuming we don't see her draw a symbol, but she's having to look up, and she's like, up the symbol. And apparently it is the symbol of the line of royalty, or, like kings, I'm assuming, of the Southlands. Over here, so all these ones. So she's under the belief that, he says that orcs chased away from their home. We as the audience know that there's orcs in, the Southlands big time. So we're thinking like, maybe this is part of like some truth to his story right here, that he's part of the Southland King and they're going to help bring him back and reunite and see what's going to happen over there. The last thing we have is Arondir, our elf, who is still captured because the whole escape attempt did not work very well. I'll get into that into this part 2. And he meets the Lord of and Master of the Orcs, Adar. We get this nice sequence of him in like he's off in the background. He's slowly coming in the foreground, so the focus is coming in, and before we can get into focus, it cuts to black. So who is this? He kind of looks elven. So maybe this is like the fair form of Anatar. Hold on to that. We'll go into episode 4 and we'll find out really who Sauron is right here. Episode 4, Belief, as I call it there. They call it the Great Wave, I think. Yes, the Great Wave. That's what they call it there. Again, really that only applies to Númenor. But there's a whole lot of blue here. So I guess, the whole idea of Númenor, supposedly premonitions of it falling into the ocean of the Great Wave. So I guess that's why you could call it there. But hey, flood of actual flood of knowledge, flood of people, whatever. Miriel. So, Queen Muriel, Regent, has visions of Numenor's destruction. So yeah, she has the premonition that Numenor is going to be destroyed, and like how can she prevent it? Because she's kind of in charge of everything. So what's she supposed to do there? Crowds of the Numenorians believe that elves will take over. Again, why? Don't know. The whole reason is that because since one elf has arrived here and has caused a little bit of disruption, she's landed on there. She's gone to the Hall of Lore. She's discovering stuff. She's kind of already asked the Queen to like take a boat like back to the Southlands. Like there's a lot of commotion happening about here, and so they're thinking, I'm like, well, one has already arrived. What happens when more come? Like how are we gonna handle this? And Pharazôn, the husband of Muriel, so he is kind of doing his political where he kind of quells the because I'm like, hey, listen, my people, like, do you honestly think that just one elf will disrupt our great civilization? Like, I promise you by by the calluses of my hands that like Numenor will always be an island, a nation of men. Like will always be ruled. No elf will like command or rule us or whatever. So he does his thing, to try to help. The crowd works in there. So he's doing that. Galadriel believes that the Southlands are in danger because like she's gotten this information, which she should have had from the very beginning, but now that she thinks that the Southlands are in danger because now that it looks like a map of the Southlands, because it's not Mordor right now, it's not named that, it's called the Southlands, but by judging how things are going, it's looking like to be Mordor pretty quick. So she has the map of her, and of course she has the information from the spy in the Black Tongue, of things happening in the Southlands. So she's like, okay, Southlands are in danger, and for us, the audience, yeah, things are looking pretty bad. So she believes that the Southlands are in danger, and she wants to restore Halbrand because she believes like, hey, Halbrand is might be the lost king of the Southlands. Like might help them as a nation. It would help you guys from Numenor. Like we would be indebted to you. Like this whole thing. I'm like, hey, everyone sort of kind of wins. You're trying to do that one there. And of course, this is me, Levi, trying to interpret this event. That's not really how it goes. Galadriel goes and basically demands an army, and basically is throughout the episode, I didn't even go into Galadriel because unfortunately she is a self-obsessed, vengeful, narcissistic, self-obsessed cow. Like, I'm sorry to describe her like that, but like for those of you who have seen her portrayal, like it's terrible. And removing Galadriel from the actual Galadriel lore that we know of Tolkien, of like if this was just some random person that we're supposed to root for, we wouldn't root for her. Like, she is awful. But thankfully she gets thrown in jail. So yeah, that was a good moment. We all love that one when Galadriel of this trying to raging at the queen, that she wants the stuff, like the queen Muriel is like, okay, I've had enough of this, and she puts her in prison right next to Halbrand right there. So now Halbrand and Galadriel are both in prison. How are they gonna get out of this one now? So Isildur believes he should go to the west side of the island. I don't even know why I put this one on there because for those of you who know Elendil, our warrior from Numenor captain. He has a son named Isildur. Isildur might sound familiar because for those of you who probably know the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies, this is when Isildur, son of the king, took up his father's sword and cut off the one ring from the hand of Sauron. Yeah, that Isildur. So you would think that he would play a great role in this sort of series. Unfortunately, as much as I would want to see Isildur, he doesn't really play a big role on this part, but I just mentioned it because it's part of the whole belief thing, like he believes he should go to the west side of the island. What for? No idea. They don't explain, they don't tell us. Back to the Southlands. Watchtower is unprepared. That is putting it lightly. Theo believes he can help. So, let's just say, again, watch part 2 of this series to show why everything, but let's just say that supplies are running low. Let's just leave it there.
And so Theo, our plucky hero, who found the sword, so he's found the sword. Everyone in there except for Arondir. Actually, no, yeah. So yeah. Arondir is this one. Yes, Arondir is meets the Secret Lord of Orcs. Yeah, we're about to meet Arondir here. Okay, we'll show you here. So most of our Southlanders, except for Arondir, are in the Watchtower. They left the Southlands because they saw some things wrong. They didn't want to at first, but then they had to pack up for the Watchtower. So now they're all at the Watchtower here, and it's unprepared. So the supplies are low, and Theo believes that he can help gather more supplies. Let's just say that like his plucky spirit, whatever, not the best at this time right here because. There are orcs about. That's kind of why they say, hey, don't go out because we don't know how many orcs are out there. And let's just say he, along with the sword hilt, because he doesn't really want to let it go because it's his precious. And he has it. Doing all stuff, he kind of gets cornered. He gets spotted by the orcs. And so he kind of has a difficult situation of trying to escape from them. And as you can see, he is stuck in a well right now. Currently, the orcs do not know he's in there, so okay, safe for the moment. He believes he's safe. He believes he can help, but now he believes he's safe. But it's kind of okay, there's orcs around them. They're still kind of looking for him. How's he gonna get out of this one? Back to the elves, and Durin shows Elrond Mithril. This is Durin. This is Durin the Younger, the Smithern, Prince Durin. He has believed he has found a new ore that is more precious than gold. Oh wow, I'm believing we can find a precious more precious than gold. Well, gee, I wonder what that could be at. It's revealed that we have discovered Mithril. So I'm like, okay, trying to discuss about the origin and the discovery of Mithril. It's like, okay, that could be cool. Interesting. It gets sour very quickly. But okay, they believe they have found something. But it's very perilous to mine, and so it's very difficult. Elrond is still with Durin trying to negotiate on what's going on, and we'll catch up with him on the next one right over here. But Halbrand imparts wisdom, and then Galadriel escapes. Okay, yes. So basically, Halbrand imparts his belief system, shall we say, why we call it belief, and. If there was any pretense gone, so I'm like, okay, so who of our is Halbrand secretly Sauron or not? It's basically confirmed here. Let's see, what do I have? There it is. Okay. This is the information that he imparts to Galadriel and herself, because she's, she's kind of, huffing, pacing around her cell, and he's coming to him a lot well, you've been kind of acting like a cow lately. Maybe you should kind of, tone it down, and she's like, oh, you're going to offer me advice? And I'm like, well, since you asked for it. And he says this. In an instance like this, it seems to me that you do well to identify what it is that your opponent most fears. Galadriel comes with us and then exploit it. And he says, and then this back to Halbrand. No. Give them a means of mastering it, so that you can master them. Okay, Sauron. Subtlety, gone. Pretty much confirmed Halbrand is Sauron, which is annoying because, again, the lore that it's supposed to be, Galadriel is supposed to be one of the individuals who spots through Sauron's fair form first. Of all the people in Eregion, when she finally, would get to the Celebrimbor, and him, the Smith, and all that, Galadriel is one of, the first and only people to say, hey, I don't know what's about this Anatar guy, but he's up to no good. So why doesn't Galadriel spot this? Don't know. Anyway, Halbrand imparts his belief system onto there, and let's just say Galadriel escapes. I'm just going to breeze right past that one because I don't want to talk about that horrible escape scene. Let's just say that 4 Númenórean soldiers cannot handle this 5-foot woman right here. She's a super girl boss, badass. Miriel shows Palantir and wants to help. So, Galadriel has escaped and she goes to find Miriel, the queen. regent, and Miriel shows her the Palantir. You know, for some of you who know like the actual Lord of the Rings, you know, like we have like the Palantir of like Saruman and Orthanc. Minas Tirith actually had a Palantir at one point. They don't really talk about it or see it, but you know there are certain Palantirs around that they can call the Seeing Stones, and there's one here in Numenor. And so she shows her the Palantir, and so Galadriel sees the vision of like Numenor's destruction, and so Miriel kind of believes she wants to help. She like kind of wants to believe that, you know, like Galadriel has some, you know, things like that. Maybe the orcs are rising in the Southlands and they should go. And but you know, like I believe the line that she says like it's a thin thread to hang the fate of a nation. I believe it's just or something right around like that. So I'm like, okay, like she kind of like wants to go like, hey, like all we have is kind of like speculation. Really, we have your word. You know, like what's going on there? How to take something a little bit more concrete or like bigger than us to, you know, convince me. We'll get to that later. But so that was sort of like, so she kind of says like, okay, Galadriel, you know, you wanted to go back to wherever, whether to the Southlands or home. We got you a boat. You can leave. No, we can't really help you on whatever this that you're going to doing, but you know, you wanted to. But also, I'm sure the Numenors were like, yeah, like, please shove her off. We do not want her here. But anyway, cutting back to the Southlands, Theo gets saved by Arondir. Yes, Arondir just shows up and saves him because we have realized that while in this talk with Adar, you know, in the previous episode, Adar says to Arondir that he wants Arondir to go send and to take a message back to the Southlanders in the Watchtower. Basically, it's surrender or die. That, you know, that's going again. But then again, why couldn't, like, just a random orc show like he can send one of his minions to go to that? Why did he send, like, an uber-talented, you know, ranger who knows the location of the orcs and can possibly bring people back to fight them again? It doesn't make sense. Okay. So, yeah, he's saved by Arondir. So, Theo, he's still in the well. You know, Arondir comes and finds him. And then they make it back in time to get to the Watchtower and delivers the message. You know, this is one of, so this is, they want surrender or die. Are we going to do that? Do you want to try and fight? You know, like this is the whole debate of what's going to happen. So eventually they kind of get the idea of like, no, we're going to try and fight. So we go to Waldrick, also still in the Southlands, where we begin to see that Waldrick supports Sauron, question mark? Because you know, Waldrick, you know, being the Tavern owner, like wasn't really a big didn't voice his opinions much. Really, like he kind of like tolerated sort of the elves. He was a little bit suspicious of Arondir and Bronwyn and their relationship, but now like, okay, now it's something like that. Hey, maybe this whole idea of keeping people watch in the Southlands for this particular reason was maybe kind of necessary because we have some people, some sympathizers of Sauron. Again, maybe not originally Morgoth, the Dark Lord, but he's gone. So we have the new Dark Lord, Sauron, that people might have been hearing about. And so like, hey, you know, like maybe we should go join Sauron. So we began to see a little bit of Waldrick's sort of motivations going there. So maybe everything's not as great as what we see with him. Let's see, Adar knows Blade is in the Watchtower. Yes, during the whole scuffle of Arondir saving Theo, you know, like, and, you know, defeating the orcs, you know, some surviving orcs were able to get aware that, oh, Theo has this sort of blade right here. And so they go and inform Adar and say, like, hey, the thing you're looking for, yeah, apparently the Southlanders have it in the Watchtower. So basically, like, okay, Adar says, like, basically, like, assemble the army, basically, is what he says. I'm like, okay, things are going down. Cut back to the elves in Eregion, Durin's wife. So, Prince Durin has a wife named Disa, and she helps with the mine collapse. The mining system, as we said, you know, is a bit perilous and dangerous. The whole mining for Mithril. The mine that they're kind of doing their stuff in collapses, and there's kind of dwarves kind of trapped under there. And we'll get into the whole aspect, but so say Disa, Durin's wife, kind of helps out in that procedure and go there. And I have here Durin, great actor. Honestly, you know, this is when Durin actually gets assigned the certain dialogue that he has, sort of motivations, and how he's able to bring the stuff. And like whoever handled like either his lines and the actor for Durin himself, like, good job. Like, it's kind of like why Durin was one of the best parts of the show. If you ask anyone who's watched the Rings of Power, there was some like, is there anyone that you're kind of like, hey, you know what, Durin, we like him. So good on that one. And we finally go to Miriel decides to help Galadriel because of Tree. Yes, the tree told her so. Basically what that is, like, Miriel, you know, like, while Galadriel is in the process of being taken away to go off to wherever she needs to go, I think she's off to go to the Southlands, Miriel happens to come across the petals of the white tree falling. Some of you might know of the White Tree of Gondor from the actual Lord of the Rings and from the Peter Jackson movies. Well, they have, that was one of the descendants, a sapling of the White Tree is of Nimloth, that we kind of get from what we have in Numenor. And so, like, okay, the old symbol, like, when the petals or the leaves fall, it's like basically a sign from, like, the gods, basically. And so I'm like, okay, so Miriel now, so I'm like, okay, so here is the sign she was looking for, something bigger and greater than herself. Like, okay, I'm taking this that I should go and help Galadriel. So now she has gotten Elendil to go ahead and captain this whole venture. She's got like a small army got up that he's in the control of. The Queen Miriel has decided to accompany Galadriel personally. They've also got Halbrand out of prison because they wanted to put Halbrand because they think he's a Southern King. But again, we all know he's probably Sauron, so why is he out of prison? Keep him there! But again, the sad thing is that we kind of root for Sauron. Again, we root for a Halbrand is what we're rooting for because Halbrand is nice. The way that Galadriel treats him and how everyone is like, we are very sympathetic towards Halbrand. So that's just one thing. So we have Galadriel and Halbrand under the command of Queen Miriel, who is going to say like, I'm going to personally take you over to the Southlands. They get Elendil, who is their captain. They got 5 ships right now that they're trying to get together. They got, I think, 500 men. Again, not much of an army, but I'm guessing they're trying to go on the lore where the Numenorians are super great soldiers that they only need 500. The battle scene, they're not great. But, you know, whatever. They have 500 men and 5 ships, about 100 for each ship, so they're going off. And so that's where we kind of end off with like halfway point. So we got this army kind of heading over to the Southlands. We got the orcs being assembled into an army to go attack the Watchtower. Things are really looking good for the Southlands. And we kind of pretty much ignore the Harfoots because no one cares about them. So that pretty much sums up this part 1 right here of our basic overall analysis. Again, I apologize for how long this video may have been because I don't know in the editing room. I'll hopefully take a small bit of time here and talk about some of the things that I would do that might help change some of this if you actually absolutely had to stick with this format. The whole thing of Galadriel jumping off the boat into the water and swimming across the entire ocean to get to the Elven lands. Like, for those of you who've seen Robin Hood Men in Tights, that's like a spoof movie. It's supposed to be a joke where he swims from Jerusalem and the Crusades all the way across the Mediterranean Sea up back to home into England. You know, like, but it's supposed to be funny. It's not meant to be taken serious. This one they're trying to. So in my mind, what I have is like, okay, again, this would not work, but hey, this is speculation here. That okay, Galadriel is supposed to go off to Valinor. Again, lore aside, that wouldn't happen because of the ban of the Valar, but so say she's going off to Valinor. They say at the zenith of when the sun is in the sky is when you say like the boat is supposed to take off. Okay, so at noon, they head off and they begin their adventure off to the Inner Lands. And after however many hours, you know, like the sun is beginning to set, so it's not like the full days or even weeks it may take to get across. So it's been like still the first day, it's just a couple hours. The sun has now beginning to set. And she can look back, and in the last, as the sun is beginning to set, she can kind of see like the spires of like the elven home. And the last time she's thinking of like maybe this would be the last time I can see it. You know, as the sun is setting, you know, like maybe she kind of has that idea of them like as the sun is setting. And that she has a like, maybe my purpose is being done. Do I feel like I should be staying here? And then she kind of hears this sort of like gasp from her other companions and she looks the other way and we see this wonderful moon rising up in the sky. And she sees like this lights, you know, like that brings her. And so now we have in the sky at the same time the sun and the moon, which kind of ties into the lore of the whole thing, is that like we have the lights, the sun and the moon, because the trees were destroyed, which Galadriel would be alive during that time to witness and know about the destruction of the trees, which gave light to the land. And then because the trees were destroyed, they decided to make from that the sun and the moon. So now here she is looking at these two lights in the sky, and she kind of realizes on here that, you know, like these lights existed because Morgoth had destroyed the trees, and she kind of realizes like, know what? You know, I have to stay. I have to finish this up. And then she jumps off the boat, and so now it's like, okay, so technically we can still see, you know, from the very off in the distance, the little bit of the Elven Empire there. So then it's not like the entire ocean that she's trying to get from. She doesn't reach all the way to Valinor, and then she's trying to swim all the way back. And I'm like, no, she's only traveled like a distance enough that she can. So at least it's plausible now. So that if she jumps off the boat and tries to swim back, because I'm like, okay, at least it's somewhat reasonable. We can, from where you're at, you can at least see from over there. So now maybe it's possible that you could swim that distance. Like, okay, at least a bit better. Let's try to fix that problem there. Then of course you can have like the whole shipwreck thing happening, where, you know, like a storm comes or whatever, and in the Otassel, you know, she's tossed about the ocean, and then when the storm calms down, you know, she's swept about far enough that she can no longer, you know, so it's like it's sea all around. And of course, you know, maybe she has no idea where her bearings are. Again, it wouldn't be too hard because when the sun rising and setting, you would know east to west, which, by the way, would not work in the whole sun and moon running, because if you look at our map, you know, she's sailing to the west, and she'd be looking back, seeing the sun setting in the east, which means it would rise in the west, which does not happen. We have it sets in the west and rises in the east. So again, that's a hypothesis, but wouldn't really work. But hey, I thought it was cool. But then you could have like the idea of where like the shipwreck happens, and then I'm like, okay, you know, when the jostling and figuring out, like, should we figure out the calms down, and there's just sea all around. So I'm like, okay, where are we? Where's the nearest land? How are we going to survive? Do we have food? You know, like that whole thing right there. And so that gives the idea of like, okay, so eventually Numenor picks them up, and on their way they're happening to go down to Numenor. They could work that in there. I would also say around this time that as soon as Galadriel leaves for Valinor, is suddenly, seems like as if like Sauron knows what's going on, that Anatar would show up with Celebrimbor, up with the elves, the elven smith, and be like, hey, let me tell you, like, I bring gifts and knowledge, and like you, Celebrimbor, are the master, like you can forge great things, and like let me impart my gifts and wisdom onto you. And then, you know, he befriends them, because Galadriel is not there to sort of like stop him, because, you know, like according to the lore, she kind of sees through the deception. Again, kind of wanted to see who exactly he is, but she knows something's off with him. But now that Galadriel's gone, like he can fully go on to there. So that handles that. At least that's some ideas right there. And then as far as, you know, the idea of Halbrand per se, we can still have Halbrand. He would not be Sauron at this point, because we actually have actual Anatar doing this stuff that he's supposed to be doing with Celebrimbor. And some of the popular theories of Halbrand is that, like, okay, so we have Halbrand who is on this raft. He says he's been chased away by orcs. And then, you know, we kind of see, like, okay, like he's kind of doing some nefarious sort of deeds, you know, like he's a bit dubious. Okay, so like he's trying to weasel his way into doing things or get out of things, so maybe a little bit of a coward per se. And that plays in to what the popular theory that Halbrand was before he was revealed to be Sauron, is that Halbrand could be the king mentioned in the Return of the King of Peter Jackson's movies, but also in the actual books, where the king that pledged himself to Isildur, you know, who's still alive at this time, when they go off to, when he hearts the realm of Gondor, that pledged himself to serve him in their hour of need, but then when the time came, you know, like whether because of like circumstances or because of their cowardice or dubious natures, they fled to the mountains, and he becomes the king of the dead. So I'm like, okay, this could be a really interesting thing of like of who this king was, and like Halbrand was like, trying to be good but ultimately failing, being that, like that either that shame or that the cowardice or whatever, like eventually takes hold, and we see, what happens where I'm like, okay, eventually he does betray Isildur at some point by, running away. Like he did in, like did he actually run away from orcs? Like that's what he said he does. So, that's some of the things right there. So that's kind of like some of the things that like could change. Like again, if I were doing this, like I wouldn't even do any of this story. Like why would Galadriel go to Valinor when the Band of the Valar is out? Like why don't we actually have Anatar himself? Why are the Númenóreans, not these super badass warrior civilizations? They're like absolute wusses. Like I just scrubbed this entire idea. But that's what I got right here. And so that basically sums up episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I have named of the Rings of Power right there. You can look for part 2, which is me talking about the Southlanders arc specifically in all these ones right here and how it falls apart and doesn't make sense. Or you can go ahead and skip to part 3 if that video is out, which is basically the continuation of this where it's about episode 5, 6, 7, and 8. So whichever video you are looking for, I'll just leave you with keep a watchful eye.